The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that which shall be done. And there's no new thing under the sun. Now, why that is important is that you'll see it in just a minute, because whether Solomon realized it or not, he actually predicted his own downfall. And we'll show you some stuff about that in another week. But let me give you an example of why this is important. If you remember the story of the first king of Israel, this would be Solomon's, be two kings ahead of Solomon. And what had happened is Samuel, the prophet, had got word from the children of Israel that they didn't want to have a prophet over them anymore. They wanted to have a king. And so they brought this before Samuel. Samuel brought it before the Lord. And we're picking up here now at verse 6. But the thing displeased Samuel, and he said, when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Samuel went and took this before the Lord. Now watch carefully this passage. The Lord said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people. In other words, I want you to listen to what they say. Listen and pay attention to what they say, and all that they say unto thee. Now watch what God says. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. He says, Samuel, don't take this personally, because they're not really rejecting you. They're rejecting me, the Lord says. And then notice what he goes on to say. According to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, wherewith they have forsaken me, served other gods, so do they also unto thee. Now, therefore, hearken unto their voices. Say, John, what's this got to do with prophecy? I'll show you in just a second. It's actually incredible. Therefore, hearken unto their voices, howbeit, now here's the part where salt and light start showing up. Protest solemnly. Notice that. Protest very, very, very straightly, very seriously. Protest what he's doing. And show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. So what does he do? Can you imagine the guts that it took for for Samuel to take the king, present him before the people, and then say these words right in front of him? And Samuel told all the words that the Lord of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king, and he said, this will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over 50s. And he will set them to ear his ground, to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries and to be cooks and to be bakers. And he will take your fields, your vineyards, your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the 10th of your seed and of your vineyards and give them to his officers and his servants. Let me just stop and say, does that sound like anything you've been hearing recently? How many know what we call that today? When they take a 10th of what you make, what do they call that? Your taxes, okay? Now, back then, that was outrageous. 10%? Well, today, that'd be pretty nice, you know? And he will take your manservant, your maidservants, your goodliest young men, and your donkeys, and put them to his work. And he will take the 10th of your sheep, and you shall be his servants. Now, what is he talking here? He's talking about, now keep in mind, Solomon says, what has happened in the past is going to happen again. And the things that are have already been. There's no new thing under the sun. Now, what's amazing about this is that God warned the children of Israel about this before it all started, and yet they were more concerned to be like all the other nations. I don't know how many of you seen this little cartoon. There's one in the very middle there. It says the stimulus bill got so big today, it decided to apply for statehood. I don't know if you have got tired of hearing all this, but it's something that we're going to have to be reminded if we're going to keep our country from falling apart. Because, ladies and gentlemen, when you think that the Federal Reserve has spent nearly $13 trillion in bailout and stimulus, that was more money that was produced. That was more than everything that was produced last year. And this is incredibly sad when you think that the average man, woman, child in America has a 42,000 plus debt upon them just because of this, which incidentally is 14 times the amount of the actual currency that is in circulation right now. And yet, it's amazing when you think of how massive this is. You would think that people will become fearful of the direction that we're going as we set our kids up and our grandkids up for destruction. But here's what happens. Samuel goes on to say, after saying all this about them, about this king, he says, "And you shall cry out in that day because of your king, which you have chosen you. And the Lord will not hear you in that day." The scariest part of this passage is the part I just now reading. God says, I'll give you what you want. This is what you want? Okay, you can have him. This is the guy you want to rule your country? Okay, go for it. But then don't come crying to me when you find out this is not the guy you really wanted. And sure enough, folks, history's repeating itself. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, "Nay, but we will have a king over us, and that we will also be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles." Now, why I'm saying all that is because the day of the inaugurational speech, you can see as the little caption down, Associated Press had this in one of the news articles. It says, "The mall after Obama's followers listened to him talk about the new era of personal responsibility." Take a look at that. That's the mall in Washington, D.C. I mean, I don't know if you can kind of get a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about, but folks, our country is in really sick shape. And the reason why this is so critical to you and I as Christians is because I don't believe it's a political problem. I think it's a spiritual problem. And the church has lost its ability to be salt, so it's good for nothing and is being trodden under the foot of men, and people the lights has become so dim, people are stumbling in darkness. And we're seeing it displayed upon the television every day as news develop. Now, with all that said, let me read to you a few interesting quotes from just some voices that are at least worth hearing talking about socialism. You can't get rid of poverty by giving people money. This is what we've been told now. We'll just give people money. We'll just print the money and give it to them. And it's like Jesus himself said, the poor you're going to always have with you. Apparently, there's a little bit more to it than just giving people money. Winston Churchill put it this way: the inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries. Which is interesting when Norman Mailer put it this way: the function of socialism is raise suffering to a higher level. Or Margaret Thatcher put it this way, which I thought was awesome: the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. And that's exactly what's happened. A theologian said it just shortly. He just recently died, but he says socialism is the religion people get when they lose their religion. Which is really interesting when you look at history, because see, history is repeating itself now. When I get to the very end of this, you're going to find an amazing thing to happen in the life of Karl Marx. A man who was a teenager was a devout believer and a blatant, open confessor of Jesus Christ.